Anything you can do to make my job easier in the plant interests me. And anything that makes my boss happy too interests me even more. So tell me why your product is good for what I'm trying to accomplish.
The Industrial Growth Institute podcast connects you with the big thinkers, makers, and subject matter experts across all aspects of an integrated B2B industrial revenue growth function. From strategy, board oversight and transactions, through all the phases of manufacturing marketing, the complexities of industrial sales, and the nuances of marketing and sales technology and customer experience, I speak with guests who bring insights, innovative perspectives, best practices, and twists on traditional approaches. Each episode explores high-level thinking and in-the-weeds actionable tactics. If you enjoyed these discussions, then please help me out by liking and sharing the podcast, and especially by leaving a comment and giving a review. So with no further ado, let's jump into this episode. Welcome to the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. I'm Ed Marsh, and my goal is to take you on a little bit of a journey every week with an interesting person who brings some kind of a unique perspective to the basically unlimited range of topics that comprise industrial manufacturing, revenue growth across governance and strategy, marketing, sales, customer success, technology, and all. And, to some extent, it's always about trying to help translate jargon into practical and actionable concepts that can, push the dots closer together between the way industrial manufacturers go to the market and the way their industrial buyers buy. So today, I think, is going to be really interesting because we're going to get both sides of that equation basically in one package. Steve Maurer is a longtime doer. He describes himself as being born with a tool in his hand. He has a strong industrial pedigree. He's owned a commercial cleaning company. He's a licensed industrial maintenance tech. He's a maintenance mechanic. He's held a boiler operator license for 40 years. He's taught many industrial safety courses. He's well versed in common safety regulations. He's worked as an electrician in food manufacturing facilities. But after years of doing that maintenance work in food manufacturing plant, he got the itch to start writing and began extensive study with the American writers and artists to launch his latest career, his pivot as an industrial content marketing copywriter. So we're going to go to hear from the marketer and the audience because he was the person consuming some of this content years ago when he was making decisions about buying, all in one package. So be sure to drop some comments for Steve. If you got questions, leave them in the comments under the recording or the video. Please like the episode, share it with folks in your company who are struggling with this topic of content creation. And by all means, while you're at it, please subscribe. And with that, let's jump in. And Steve, thank you so much for joining me.
Glad to be here, Ed.
So how's Western Arkansas today?
It is 74 and sunny today, as opposed to last week when we had a little bit of snow. It's getting as bad as Indiana was. That snow, I guess, is that global warming stuff. I don't get that. But yes, it's a beautiful day today.
So you're in Fairfield, I think the northwest corner near Bentonville,
northwest corner, about probably 20 blocks from the University of Arkansas main campus.
And I think you're not too far from Fort Chaffee in Fort Smith, where
they're about probably 2 hours south of us.
So you talked about snow. I spent the coldest night of my life at Fort Chaffee when I was in the Army. I don't know what it was about it, whether it was a combination of humidity and temperature or the hawk blowing or across the plains or what it was, but it was cold.
Yeah, it can get that way. People are surprised that I showed snow pictures on Facebook and wandering around ankle deep or sometimes almost knee deep in it. People, are you sure you're in Arkansas? I said, well, last I checked, that's what Google Maps was in. So,
all right. So you've always had an affinity for working on things with your hands. It was kind of a hobby at first, and then a career. Was that just the way you were born, or what took you in that direction?
Well, Dad was kind of a tinker, so I guess I inherited the wrench gene from him. I always liked to work on things, and I actually always kind of liked to write. English was one of my strong suits in high school, and math was not. So thankfully, I'm not a mathematician. But I just like putting things together, taking things apart, and making things run, which basically has been what I've done for 40 some years.
I think when we first connected, it was back, actually, I looked at my notes, so I didn't have to guess, November of 2015. So 9.5, almost 10 years ago. And at the time, you were working in a Tyson Foods chicken plant, if I remember correctly. You were on the maintenance team, and you started writing on the side.
Yeah, I actually started writing in 2010, I guess. I've been doing the writing part for that long, doing it pretty heavy since 2012. But yeah, it's a combination of both. And I was able to glean a lot of information from the salesmen, which has been good because now they owe me. And if I need any information from them, it's easy to get. And I've actually used them for contacts, and they send me stuff and I send them information. So yeah, I've always liked to work on things, make things go. It's a lot more fun than a lot of other hobbies you could have.
But not everything you do is concrete. I mean, we'll talk more about the kinds of clients you have, but I know you recently started with an ERP software company. So it's not just, this bearing goes on this shaft and here's the way you ought to sell it. You're talking about some big conceptual stuff too.
Absolutely. There's a lot of, when you think B2B, especially manufacturing, there's so many gears in the gear train, and there's a lot to it. And I was able to do a lot of the mechanical side along the electrical side, but I also had to deal with some of the ERP and MRP software. And so there's always something fun to write about.
Right.
And interesting.
So if you started writing in 2010, that's honestly before a lot of companies, even tech companies, completely understood inbound marketing, content marketing. Certainly industrial companies didn't really begin to get that sense, I would say, until 2015. How did you have your ear to the rail? How did you sense that so far ahead of time?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I just always, I would read some of the sales material and think, this can be better. And they had to convince me. So I noticed around 2011, 2012, the content marketing was really coming into swing. They've always had some form of lead generation, but more or less a hit or miss type thing.
Right. So when you would look at it and you'd say to yourself, geez, this could be better. Give me an example of how you found it lacking and how you envisioned it could be improved.
Too many features and not enough benefits.
Okay.
When you look at B2C, we always think, features over or benefits over features, and it's more hypey type stuff.
Right.
And I think a lot of manufacturers came into this forgetting that the person who was making the buying decision was also a human. And at this, while the features were important, the benefits behind the features were just as important. And excuse me, I think one thing they forgot to do is ask the so what question.
Right.
Which is what I do whenever I write copy. Here's a great feature. So what? Okay, that's a good benefit, but so what? Go deeper than that. And you have to drill down until you find what I call the CEB, or core emotional benefit. Sure, we're not jumping up and down and hoping to see the wind in our hair, which thankfully, I have fewer gray hairs than last year. But we still have the things: getting home at night, making a good impression on our boss, helping our company move forward. And these are all emotional aspects that a lot of the sales and marketing material was lacking. It was just, this bearing goes here, this bolt goes there, and the thing runs. Ooh, and I think because of that, there was no differentiation between products, because honestly, a bearing is a bearing is a bearing.
Right.
And a motor is a motor is a motor. Sure, there are some differences, but what makes it unique? I remember reading way back, one of the early copywriters went to a brewery, and he was helping them punch up their sales. And so he took a tour through the plant, and he found out that, they steam clean these bottles before they put them in. And he'll, hey, that's pretty cool. And they said, well, everybody does that. He says, yes, but nobody's mentioning it. And if you can be the first to market, I believe it was Schlitz at the time. And that was a big promotional thing because they found not necessarily a unique benefit, but one that nobody was talking about because they assumed it wasn't important.
So many industrial manufacturing company executives, though, worry about, standing out or being different. On the one hand, they want to differentiate. On the other hand, they're really hesitant to take a different approach besides talking about the technical details. Mm-hmm. How do you get the leadership in a company comfortable with the fact that you're going to talk about the so whats as opposed to the millimeters and pounds per square inch?
I think it's getting better. A lot of them are understanding that they have to get more granular with the emotional benefits if they want to be a market leader. And it's introducing them. A lot of them I don't think really understand the buyer's journey. And so if they can understand that, how it goes through, then you can begin saying, hey, well, let's change this a little bit. You can't just wholeheartedly say you're doing it wrong. This is the way it's got to be done. You got to kind of ease into it. In fact, I had one company, and it goes right down to the language used. I was writing for a big safety gear manufacturer, and we were going to start up a blog for them. And they sent me the topic and everything, and they sent me, and I was actually kind of shocked because they had a style guide, and it actually laid out the personas. They had 3 different personas that they were selling to, and it described that person right down to the belt buckle, the dog, and the truck or car that they had. Okay. And it was really good, but it was very formal when it came to the language. And so I wrote it like that. And then I took it over and I was reading it and I said, this sucks. This will never go because we're writing for the web now. And we're not writing for necessarily the suits, but the guys in the blue. Right. And so I wrote that, and then I wrote how I would write it. And I said, okay, here's the way you wanted it written. Here's the way I think it ought to be written. You make a decision, and I'll write the future stuff that way. And they picked mine because they realized how much more conversational. Right. It wasn't boardroom talk. It was shop floor talk. And that gets to the people who are really not just a decision maker, but the actual end users is who we need to talk to.
So often they'll initiate a project, but across that buying team, you talk about the buying journey. We also have the buying team. So we have to be able to appeal to the maintenance manager, to the plant engineer, to the plant manager, to the CFO, and they all speak different language.
Exactly. You have to write to all of them. So that means one kind of content won't cut it. Right. This is not an easy decision like me going out and buying a set of golf clubs. The only thing I have to worry about is making sure my wife doesn't find out about it until I've already had them. But when you get to B2B, especially in manufacturing, it's a considered purchase. It has to go through a lot of different people. And you've got to explain to the CFO what's a good monetary choice, and to the CEO and the president why this is good for his company. And then say you're selling a new brand of fork trucks. You got to go to the fleet manager of that company and explain to them why this is the best one. And then you have the safety manager. You've got to explain things to them. Right. Here, this is a safer one. And so it is more of a considered purchase. The buyer cycle takes a lot longer than buying golf clubs or a sports car.
And where do you see content following across that journey? Is it all for the demand gen or lead gen up front, or is it for sales enablement through that journey to help people understand when they may start to get distracted and remember all the other things they got to do to keep them on track for why this is important?
That's a good question. Because I just brought up, I'm looking off the side. I got my other screen over here because I have the 2025 B2B content marketing report from CMI, Content Marketing Institute. Mm-hmm. And the main challenges that they show in B2B content are, one of them is actually aligning content with the buyer's journey. 45% say they find it challenging to identify and align their content with that. And then another one that has to do with lead generation, like you were talking about, efficient lead generation and nurturing processes. Nearly half lack efficient lead generation and and nurturing processes. I think so often it's kind of like a dog chasing a car. And I've often had one chase me, or one to stop and open the door and say, okay, now it's caught it. What are you going to do with it?
Right.
And I think it's the same thing with the lead generation and nurturing process. Is companies will put out lead gen pieces, and then when a buyer actually reads that and gets excited about it, then they wonder, okay, what do we do with them now?
Right.
We captured their attention. Where do we funnel them to?
So much depends, though, on the intent data. In other words, the first party intent. What are they doing with it? I'll give you an example. One of the most effective lead generation tools that I've ever found for capital equipment companies is to write a guide about improving the OEE of whatever kind of equipment they sell. Yes. And then I try to help them understand, when you see a download of that guide at 11 at night, improving the OEE of whatever kind of equipment that is, what does that tell you? And they, somebody's got a problem and I need to follow up with them. Okay, I agree that it probably means somebody believes that their OEE could be better. Now, it doesn't mean they got a problem. It certainly doesn't mean that they're getting ready to buy a machine. And it probably doesn't mean that the person doing it at 11 at night has the authority to even launch that project. But they're the one dealing with the crap when second shift or third shift goes sideways. So let's wind back and think about what this digital body language tells us. It tells you as a salesperson, there's something going on that plant floor. Something isn't right. So rather than going in guns blazing, hey, since you downloaded this guide, let's talk about our machine. Rather, use that as a clue to then begin to figure out who the plant engineer is, the plant manager, the maintenance manager, the second shift supervisor, and begin doing just decent discovery work. And there's something going on. Ask the question so they start to tell you about it. And then you can begin your sales process. But they think somehow, we get this lead. Now we're going to talk about buying a machine.
Yeah. No, I think like you were saying there, and it's a journey with these people. Right. And you don't, I didn't take my wife out to dinner and say I liked her and then immediately say, okay, let's get married. It was a wooing process, and it's very similar when we're wooing potential customers to buying our equipment or whatever it might be.
Right.
And so why did they download that? What was in that might have triggered some interest, and what is some follow-up content that we can bring with it?
Right.
Because you actually want to become a trusted expert. You want to become a resource for information, and they will then logically think, these people cared about what I think about. Maybe I need to talk to them next time I need to buy that equipment.
So in other words, the next step might be an audit checklist or a guide to how to audit your line, as opposed to, here's a guide for how to buy a new machine. I mean,
right.
Let's push those dots close together in a way to help them.
Help them solve a problem until there is no other solution but to buy whatever it is you're selling.
All right. So you said earlier, and I think it's embedded in a lot of our conversation, you said writing content for the internet. How often are you writing content for print?
It's getting rare these days. I have a lot of what you write for the print, write for the internet can be used on print.
Right.
It's more the language. I think the language is becoming more, not necessarily informal, but more human to human.
Conversational.
And yes, a lot more conversational copywriting than there used to be. Okay. And a friend of mine, Nick Osborne, started that way back, and I've learned a lot from him. And even in today's new ages of different kinds of content creation, I think we need to keep that authentic human voice. We're kind of like we're talking here. We're talking casually across the internet, but keep it like I was having a cup of coffee with somebody in a diner.
Right.
We're not going to use a lot of boardroom talk. We're going to use some technical jargon because you can't completely do away with it.
Right.
But and even if you talk to some of these people, I have talked to a few of them. Oh, we needed this formal, we need these things and that. And then when you talk to them on a Zoom call or however, the phone call, and we get to talking, I'll sometimes stop, say, we're having a good time and I'm understanding what you're selling. Why don't we talk that way to your people who are buying?
And what do they say?
oh, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Well, yeah, that reminds me of another thing I wanted to ask you. Even today, the number of industrial manufacturing executives that I hear tell me our industry is different. Our buyers don't use the internet like they're buying software or like they're buying tennis shoes. And I shake my head. I mean, if that's your opinion of your buyers, I'm not sure that I can help you. There's some really deeply held assumptions.
Whenever you assume, we know what that means.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah, I think, in fact, I'm working with a company now that has old traditional values, which is great, but they're letting it bleed over a little too much into how they're presenting things to their customers. They think, well, our customers well, no, your customers have grown up and now their kids are coming in.
Yep.
And, there's very little paperwork anymore involved. I've got a printer, but I just very rarely use the thing.
Wow.
A ream of paper will probably last me 2 years. In fact, I just bought one finally, because most everything is consumed on the internet, on the phone. People are forgetting this. This is becoming more and more prevalent these days.
Right.
And you've got to create content that can be read on various devices besides just print. Now, you go to a trade show like we were talking earlier before the call, yes, you're going to have some print materials. But even then, what you write still is speaking to the same people that you're posting to online.
But
These
you could
same
even
folk.
put a scannable code on a little sign on top of a machine or on top of a display and let them access that online.
Absolutely. I remember when QR codes first came out, and then they said they were gone, and now you see them again everywhere. They're all over the place, even on TV. And everything, therefore, is trackable. I remember you couldn't, the big thing about direct mailing was it was traceable. You could track it back when they sent in the order card. When TV came along, they can't do that. Oh, yes, you can. If you think when old Frank Thomas is selling his Total T, if that text means something, it lets them know when they were looking at it, what time of day, what program they were watching. So everything will go back to that. And then you can improve your marketing, find out when people are watching. So anything that's like that. And QR codes are amazing.
So let's go back a little bit to this epiphany that you had. When you were turning wrenches, managing a maintenance team, doing that kind of work, and you would decide that there was something that could be better, and you'd go to look for information. We're talking after the Yellow Pages. Mm-hmm. You probably had an MSC catalog on your shelf. You may have had Thomas Register books, but how were you going about finding information early on?
The internet was around back then. Okay. Not very well, not like it is today.
Right.
But you had to find that information somewhere. And even the Thomas Register and some of these others had online services where you could actually look up. And a lot of it I had to do myself. Here's this company and their product. Here's a similar product. I had to figure it out myself. And one of my favorite books is by Steve Krug. Says, "Don't make me think. Don't make me think. Show me. Here are the differences. Here are the differences there. Allow me to make an informed decision." That's the biggest thing. Is when we're doing our content, when we're doing our sales and marketing, let the buyer make an informed decision, not just kind of a hit and miss.
So you said that you often advise companies that they have to dig into the so what. And I gather that as you were consuming content yourself in the course of your day job, that you weren't getting the so what. I mean, you connected those dots, you figured it out yourself. And so you were able to go find different bits of information. But at what point did you see that companies started to understand that so what more?
Oh, it's probably been in the last 10 years, they're getting better at it. Maybe a little farther than that, but a lot of them are still the type of copy I hate to write is some of these product descriptions that are just, dimension A, dimension B, the hole's this big, your shaft is that big. That doesn't tell me anything unless I'm just looking for something, on a bearing. or a gear, you're probably not going to have a lot of content marketing on. Nobody gets really super excited. But when you put that into a machine, now you have and the more complex the product you're selling, the more your content marketing actually has to explain that to your end user, to your buyer. So probably in the last 10, 12 years, maybe, I've been seeing companies getting better at it. I built my business for 10 years while I was still in the, turning wrenches and getting shocked.
Right.
And I was beginning to see a little bit better information coming our way. Now, my boss, he didn't want to mess with it. He said, when salesmen come, he says, you need to talk to Steve. He's the guy. He's going to make a decision anyhow. And so I would actually grill the salesmen. Some of them hated to see me, and some of them loved to see me, because then they all of a sudden began understanding their own product.
Right.
I think, if your salespeople don't understand your product, and I think that goes clear up to CEO.
Sure.
If they don't understand the product, they don't know how to sell it.
Obviously, you're not the typical Vassar or Smith College creative writing grad that you often find in some of these content marketing agencies. Can a content marketing agency really create viable content for industrial manufacturing or not?
Absolutely.
So how would they do that? They've never been on a factory floor. They don't know righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. They don't know any of that. How can they possibly do it?
They're going to have to, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some legwork. Now, some of them are going to have to get into the factory, get on the shop floor, and understand. They need to understand who they're selling for first, or who they're selling to, what their challenges, needs, and interests. I call them the C&I factors. What are the challenges, needs, and interests of the people that we're selling to? How do I address them, and how does my machine or piece of equipment or whatever I'm selling, how does that address these? So they're going to have to get their hands dirty, or find someone who can explain it to them, and then be open to understanding basically a different way of life. It's one thing to sit behind a computer with a pen and paper and write stuff. It's another to be on the factory floor and understanding, well, this is why that's important to them.
Right.
I know some companies that are doing an excellent job. One of the best, I think, that does that, it probably is Klein Tools. Happens to be my favorite tool to begin with. But they don't just build something and then sell it. They actually field test it. They take it out to the actual people who are using this as, is this going to fly? Does this help you in any way? And get field experience from that. And so I think some of the people who are going to write the content really need to get to at least talking with the people who are going to be the end users. I think so many times, well, not a whole lot, maybe. I'm being a little harsh there, maybe, but then again, I've seen it. They will build something they think is the next best thing since sliced bread, and not really checked out the market to see if they needed a new way to slice bread.
Sure.
So you really need to understand what your target market is, what's important to them, before you even develop a product, let alone market it.
But as you said, also, once you do, you need to speak the language of the buyer. And you write on your website, I think, extensively about using language of the buyer, and you've touched on it in this conversation. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend the companies put together a style manual that very specifically includes some of the direct language that they would want to use, or how do you incorporate
that? Absolutely. I think if they don't have a style guide, sometimes I will help them with it. In fact, I'm helping one develop their style guide right now. They can find it actually on social media. Find out where your ideal client is, your ideal market is, and how are they talking about your products, and then mimic that back to them. Sure, a lot of the people in manufacturing have a college degree or have some kind of diploma. A lot of them don't. A lot of them have real world experience.
Right.
You need a combination of both, but listen to your market, and they will tell you how they want to be spoken to.
One really interesting, we're going to talk more about AI as we go along, but one really interesting use of AI that I've seen is to craft a really well-written buyer persona, and not just some of the psychographic stuff. They drive this kind of car, they've got this big belt buckle, some of that kind of thing that you talked about, but really qualitative interviews with them to understand why they make a decision, what the process is, and all of that. Then take that buyer persona, feed it into a custom GPT to basically make that GPT an analog of that persona, and then feed that GPT content that you've written and say, okay, please adapt it, please react to this as that buyer persona, or adapt this to be better for that buyer persona. Have you tried or seen anyone try doing that?
Oh, yeah. I have my own trained monkeys.
Okay.
One in particular, I fed it everything it knows about me, everything off of my website and all this kind of thing. And said, okay, tell me who I am. And it came pretty close.
Yeah.
You need to customize any GPT that you're using. If you're doing just COTS, commercial off the shelf AI, don't expect good results at all.
Right.
But it can also, one thing I do a lot of times especially for a new customer or a new client, I will actually take PDFs of their web copy, feed that into my favorite GPT and say, okay, tell me what this voice is like. Tell me who these people are. And then it can give you some kind of a persona matchup there. Mm-hmm. And it's also able to, it found customer personas that I should be talking to that I hadn't thought of before based on who I was. And so it can be an eye-opener. You do have to be careful, or you'll get too generic of content. It sounds good, looks good, but it's not necessarily effective.
Right. So you mentioned blog posts, you've mentioned style guides. I would assume blog posts are the most common form of content you work on, but what kinds of content across the board? Give me some other examples.
Okay, blog posts, newsletter articles. I have a client that I've been writing for 8 years, writing newsletter content. They're electrical catalog house, more or less. Mm-hmm. So I've been writing 3 articles a month for them for like 8 years now. Me and another guy, we share the duties. I get 2 articles in one issue, and he's got 1, and then we swap on the other. But and that's one reason that company has figured it out. They like a little bit of humor. Now, not belly laughs, right, but they do want it to be relatable. And that's another key term. If it's relatable, I don't want to put people to sleep. And I actually make sure I turn it off. Yeah, I wrote an article. I've got an Alexa sitting over here. And one of the things that I do to edit is I'll have Word read it back to me. Mm-hmm. Because when I can hear what I've written, I can always find the mistakes. In the very end of this one, I said, it's mealtime. Alexa, turn out the lights. And my office went dark. I forgot to turn it off because I was having to read out loud. But so newsletter articles, one of my favorites comes, and the name escapes me, but they make electrical safety devices. And every hump day, they send out a new article and in their newsletter. Now, they never finish the article in the newsletter. They get you enticed, they get you interested, and then to read more, you got to go to the website. And so they're double dutying their content. They're starting it on a newsletter and finishing it up in their blog on a website.
Right.
White papers, case studies, sales sheets. A lot of recently been finding more sales enablement copy.
Okay.
Which is it's been around a while, probably not as defined as it has been for the last 3 years, maybe. But basically, cheat sheets for your sales team. Mm-hmm. Here's videos. Here's call scripts, or here's a battle card for, when a customer has this objection, how do you answer that? Or right. Email templates. And so, doing some sales enablement stuff. Some brochures. Actually, still do some brochures from time to time. Recently, did one for a translation service, which seems like it's far afield from what I normally write, but they were wanting to offer their services to a safety crowd, okay, to the industrial safety crowd. And who better to write that than somebody who's taught industrial safety?
Sure.
And so we worked, and there was actually going to be a print brochure that they could use at trade shows as they were going to.
How about regular web pages?
I do that.
Video scripts?
I have done some video scripts. It's not maybe my strong suit, but I have written video scripts and taken some training in that. The talking head type are great. And I think video is going. In fact, I probably need to bone up more on it because video is becoming a very popular media for consuming content, and that is evidenced by when I had to do some work on my son's car. The first thing I did was go to YouTube and find out how to do it. Right. And I think manufacturing companies can actually capitalize on that trend because, believe it or not, when I could sneak my phone into production, and YouTube was still fairly new, but if I was come up with an issue, I would type it in and watch a video and then see how that would relate. So I think video, especially how-to videos, sponsored by.
Fascinating point there. Not only B2C, you were doing it in a B2B environment, and then
B2B.
you make that great point, sponsored by. So it's not necessarily about their specific product. It's about how to solve this problem. And by the way, trust us, get to know us, because we're the ones that are helping you as you're trying to figure this out on your job.
And they're the ones that end up in my subscribed channels on YouTube.
Right.
I have done that a lot, especially a lot of electrical videos and new products coming out.
Right.
And I ended up writing about some of them. I actually had one that came out near the end of last year about new color coding for Romex cables. And I was used to the white and yellow and orange and black, and then they were adding in purple and pink. We had all the colors of the rainbow. And but I saw that from a video. Somebody was explaining the new colors coming out, and he wasn't even a salesperson for that company, but he was doing a good job of selling that product. And they coming out from Romex and Sarah Wire actually came out with those two, who are the two main, and that's more for consumer use, electricians wiring homes,
right?
Because you don't use a lot of Romex in commercial,
right?
Video is going to be a big thing. If it's done right.
Put video aside, because that hasn't been in your center of mass. Across all the other types of content you described, what do you think is the hardest one to write?
Well, my meat and potatoes is blog posts and newsletter articles.
Okay.
My dessert would be case studies. White papers can be difficult, or special reports, depending on how you want to write them, how you need them written. Even case studies can be an issue if the happy customer, because it's basically chronicling a happy customer journey with your product. And
it's a hero journey. They were panicked at first, and then they're happy at the end.
And that's the big part. You got to you've got to impress upon that on the company when you're writing a case study that they are not the hero.
Right.
The customer is the hero. The customer is Luke Skywalker, and you are Obi-Wan Kenobi, right, helping him learn how to use the Force and save the universe.
Does a light bulb go on for them when you use that analogy?
They finally start doing that, because that's what the customer journey was all about. When Joseph Campbell wrote The Hero of a Thousand Faces, that's what he was talking about. It's the basic script for all the movies that we like.
Sure.
All the stories from Ulysses and Hercules down to Obi-Wan Kenobi and even, some of these other heroes. If once they see that in their light, yes, they are the trusted advisor who is helping the guy who's tasked with this amazingly difficult problem to solve. And then when the light bulb does come on, when you explain to them that way, it's, oh, okay. The difficulty is when you can't use the customer's name,
sure,
company. That makes it difficult. I call them anonymous case studies.
Right.
Those are actually the hardest to write because, they sound so, I won't say like fairy tales, but to be accused of making it up.
Sure.
But I have been seeing some good case studies where you can use it. White papers, they're not that complex. There's just three basic types of white papers and then combinations thereof. Gordon Graham, an amazing person, the white paper guy, breaks it down into chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, and then mixes there which ones work together and which ones don't. They can be difficult. Usually people want to put too much into them. So you have to pick what is the purpose of this white paper before you write it.
So no Neapolitan. Isn't that the ice cream that mixes all three of those together?
I hate Neapolitan. It does not work well in white papers. No.
So how often would you say the marketing department reaches out to you saying, we just can't figure this out, versus the executive team saying, somehow our marketing team can't figure this out?
Usually it's the marketing team that comes to me.
Okay.
As they realize, they have been tasked. I'm their Obi-Wan Kenobi in many ways.
Right.
They need to satisfy the CEO's wishes, and they know they're having trouble. In fact, going back to that CMI report, one of the issues that they have is coming up with the resources to get this done. They don't have a writer on staff.
Right.
And there's some that do. You would be amazed at the huge national companies, and you would think they would have an amazing team. I was talking to one, and she had 2 girls working with her, and that was it. And none of them had any electrical experience, and that's what we were writing about. So they don't have the resources available. And sometimes the training. I have helped companies start blogs and then let them take it over from there. Once we got them trained in how to do it properly and what to look for, my job was done.
So they didn't drive it into the ground? They kept it going?
They kept it going, and I lost the blog writing gig, but I was getting the bigger content pieces like the case study, the tech bulletins. I've written a lot of tech bulletins for them. And if you're going to have an outside writer do work like that, give them all the information you can. We might be amazing with words, but we are not mind readers.
Right.
And we need to know what your product is. That's one reason I stick with what I know. I can understand the technical jargon that might bore other people to tears. That's why I was good in my job at what I did. Everybody else would just try to figure it out, and the first thing I did, we got a new piece of equipment and was read the manual. And on more than one occasion, I would have someone come, how'd you figure that out so quick? I said, well, on page 15, if you start reading there, and I kept PDFs of all the manuals.
I was going to say, would you file the manual? Because most machines I know of, about 2 years later, no one's got any idea where the manual was.
Absolutely. A lot of times now you can download a PDF, and I had a PDF of everybody. I would keep a spare copy. I'd take it home with me. And sometimes I would use the old printer behind me, copy out the pages I need. Or if I had the PDF, I would print out the wiring diagram, and I would mark that thing all to pieces and then throw it away and print out a new copy for the next one.
Right.
But yeah, but when you take the time, that's how machine troubleshooting goes. When you take the time to learn your machine and what it does and what it isn't doing, you understand how to troubleshoot it and how to fix it. And it's the same thing with your marketing. If you take the time to understand your audience, what their challenges, needs, and interests is, and how your content is supposed to be addressing it, you can fix whatever marketing problem you're having, because you may not be addressing what they really need to know.
Let's talk blog post length. 10 years ago, you could write 300, 400, 500 words, do a little bit of basic SEO optimization. Now, I think the statistics I see show that you need somewhere 2,000 to 2,500 words for a post to really do its work in terms of search and content lead generation. Mm-hmm. What's your experience been with that? Or you see that trend happening?
I'm writing longer blog posts. Mine usually, when I send somebody my creative brief, I say, tell me how long you want this to be, but if you don't tell me, it's going to be between 1,200 and 2,000 words minimum. Okay. Because you can write for SEO, but you also have to write for the human factor. So it's got to be enough in there. It was years ago, somebody said, how long should a blog post be? I said, well, long enough.
Right.
And said, the right answer is long enough to tell a story, but not enough to bore them to tears. But for SEO, yeah, you have to have a little bit more in there. And unfortunately, SEO is getting more difficult because there's a lot of, if you Google anything, what is the first entry that comes up?
Google's answer.
Their AI-generated answer.
Right.
But I think you have to have enough, 2,000 words is probably a walk in the park anymore. When I started writing for the newsletter years ago, they wanted 350 to 400 words, and it's now most of mine are well over 1,000 words to get the topic structured. And I've added a few things in the way that I close them out. There's just not a conclusion, and here's why you should buy our product. That's not going to fly, but 10 key takeaways from this, or 5 key takeaways from this article. Because there are 3 places that a reader's going to go on a blog post. They're going to read the title. If that interests them, they might read the first paragraph, and then they're going to look at the end. And if I can bring those 5, 6, 7 takeaways, then they can go back because they'll match what's in the article. Is this worth my time and effort to read?
On your website, you've got a project discovery form, and you ask for an approximate budget, and the options range from $500 to $50,000 for a project budget. What do most middle market industrial manufacturers spend on content every year? Do you have a sense? Not just with you, but overall.
I don't think there was any in there. A lot of it depends on the complexity of their product. You're not going to spend a lot maybe on a motor, but you will on a machine. And I don't see anything in here. Let me ask it. What is the average spend? Yeah, we'll do a little. But I'd say, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 at least.
How often does somebody check the $50,000 box in your form?
They don't. They're there for me. They're red, yellow, and orange flags for me. Very few people. The only ones that'll check the $50,000 are the ones that are going to try and sell me something.
But I love the fact that you're setting an expectation with it. I mean, what you're doing is saying, hey, if you think that writing content is something you can get done for $250 once every 6 months, you're probably mistaken. Maybe we have a quick phone call, but let's recognize that this needs to be a legitimate business investment. I love the way you set that expectation.
It is setting them up to know that I'm not cheap. And it's also letting them know that they can't afford cheap. That, if they're going to go to someplace, some of these other content mills, which is where I started. My very first article was about a carpet seam iron and how to use it. And I got $4.95 for it. A lot of people are still looking for that kind of content. I don't do that anymore. Most people don't have an idea when I talk to them how much they actually want. So I'm setting them up to know that, you're not going to get away with $5, $10, $20 because your content is more important than that. You've got to relay that's just not for me. I mean, this is how I make a living. But your content is valuable because when it comes down to it, what is a new customer worth to you? And so the effort, the time, money, and effort you put into your content should address that.
So you have these conversations where you explain to people that, geez, you're not speaking in a voice, you're not producing content that's going to resonate. You've shared a couple instances where they were appreciative and open and took your advice. I'm sure that sometimes they push back and say, no, we know our buyers and they want this rigid, formal, traditional way of writing. How often does that happen?
Occasionally. I don't work with hundreds and hundreds of companies. In a good year, because I'm loyal to my clients and they become loyal to me, 6 or 7 in a year, perhaps. And like I said, the electrical company has been a client for 9 years, 8 or 9 years. The ones that are real hard sell, listen, it's easy. I say, I'm sorry, then I can't help you. If you are so set in your ways that you're not going to be able to take advice, or I will write it as long as it's not unreasonable. And when it fails, I don't say, I told you so. I say, well, let's try a different angle because this is something new for them. A lot of this content generation. And you know how we are. It's the same way when when I was talking to my dad, and you tell me, no, you got to do it this way. And finally, we come to an understanding this is what works best for our relationship.
A lot of the really important knowledge is in the minds of people like the guy you used to be in your old career. And so it's not just writing, it's also journalism. You have to have an effective way to interview people to extract the information they may not even realize is important. It's just second nature to them. They think everybody knows it, but it's critically important. How does somebody get good enough at interviewing to actually be able to extract that tacit knowledge from maintenance techs and service technicians and people like that?
It takes some skills. Obviously, journalism is a great analogy, because you're going into a situation and you're going to find out what that situation is. So you learn to ask the questions, the whys, the hows. Why is that important to you? How does that work for you? If you could do something better, what would it be? If we could produce something better. I think if a marketer goes in to talk to, say, somebody like me when I was on the floor, and they say, okay, here's our product, this is a good fit for you, they should be asking me why I think it might be a good fit, right, and what I could do, what I would like to see to improve it. I think developing some of these customer relationships, social media is a great listing post. If they're creating blog posts, they can find out exactly what their people are thinking, and then they know the right questions. It takes a while.
So where on social media do you think is the best place to listen to kind of maintenance, floor level, service technician kind of people? Do you use Reddit? Where else do you go?
My main social media is LinkedIn. That's where I have more or less planted my social media flag as far as promoting my own self. A lot of the others are getting too noisy, especially in these days. There's not enough on there. But LinkedIn, any place where there's forums where...
But that's promoting yourself as a writer.
Yeah.
If you wanted to listen to maintenance managers talk about the problems they have, where on social media would you go to listen to them?
Well, now in LinkedIn, you would search out, there's several good groups just dedicated to that, those topics.
And it's not all full of people pitching stuff. There's legitimate conversation.
There have been some the best way to get answers is to ask questions. So you go into these groups, not promoting yourself, but asking questions. What is the biggest challenge you've seen today in keeping your production line running, for example? That's place. There's Reddit. There's, what's the name? X does some, but you need to find groups of individuals on any social media platform. And then send out questionnaires too. I mean, a company should have a house list of emails. Send out surveys if you want to find out, and just let them know that honest answers are all that's accepted. We don't want to hear what you think we want you to hear.
Right.
And so be honest in your surveys. And you can post these online or anywhere, but sending them out to a dedicated list is even better.
Let's come back to AI. Obviously, it's significantly changed content. It's significantly changed your writing process, I know from some of our conversations. Talk about how you used to do writing, how you do it now, and how AI has facilitated that transition.
I still kind of write like I always did. That hasn't changed.
Do you start with a detailed outline?
I start with research first. Okay. I got to do some market research. And before, it would be scouring the hundreds, tens, 20s, hundreds of websites one by one, especially if I didn't know anything about the topic. AI is where I find the most help in researching, because especially my favorite for that are Perplexity, which is based around research, and Gemini 1.5 with deep research. Those are my two top research AIs. Because you've got to write a good question. You got to tell exactly what to look for. I pop that in there, and then I go get a cup of coffee because it'll take them a while. and then they can spit me out a report with the citations so I can go back and vet what they said.
Right.
Then I do take that research and I turn it into a PDF form, pop it into another AI that I use strictly for outlining. And I have given it explicit instructions on how I want an article outlined, what the format is, how I want it to conclude, pop that in there. Then I will take that outline, paste that into a Word document, and then I will write based on that outline.
So do you know what your thesis is when you put it in for the outline, or are you asking it to consume the material and suggest what the thesis should be?
Well, the thesis is based on the research.
Okay.
For example, I just did it should be coming out, I think, next week, on manufacturing and how to use the B to B to C model, which is, I had to do a lot of research on that because it's a kind of a new concept to them. But so I did a lot of research and I kicked it back, and then I would ask it more questions, and then I read all that, and I actually had 5 documents then I set into Claude. I said, okay, now I want you to read and analyze this, and before you do anything, tell me what you got out of what I just gave you, because I want to make sure it was actually reading and seeing what I was seeing.
Right.
I said, okay, it looks like you got it. And I have it where I always write the headline and a lead paragraph. So that here's the headline, lead paragraph. This is what I want in the second paragraph. And then you go for the rest of it. Give me an outline. Give me a bulleted outline. And then that's what I will plug into. So yeah, I will help it because the AIs are good at analyzing data. That's their strong suit.
And do you ever have it take the outline and give you a first draft, or is the drafting all done manually, I would say?
The draft is all done manually. I've tried that a time or two, and it was kind of like that article I sent to that safety company. The first one sucked.
Right.
Some people do. They like it to write the crappy first draft, and that's fine. I tried that. It didn't work for me. I would rather get an outline because the biggest problem for most writers is writer's block or the blank page blues.
Right.
I got something to write about, no idea where to start. Now I have a starting point, and it's a logical starting point. In fact, with Claude, we do it in Artifact, and we will tweak that. I almost talk like it's human. For me, it's my buddy, and I don't have to give him any coffee. But we'll take that Artifact, which is kind of on the second screen more or less, and tweak it back and forth. So I don't like this, move that down here. This sucks, pull it out. And then once I have worked on that outline, that's what I then put into a Word doc to go ahead and writing.
I see.
And then I use the bullet points under a subhead, begin writing the content for that subhead.
So it doesn't sound to me like it's made it a lot faster for you. Maybe it's made the research more efficient, but it sounds like...
the research, yeah. What you get if you use too much AI is what a good friend of mine, Russ Henneberry, called bull chicken output. Nobody likes to eat bull chicken. And it all starts sounding the same.
Right.
What makes my writing human is the human who's writing it.
Right.
And I actually had I got in the bind one time, said, okay, I got to have AI write this. I'll make a few changes here. I sent it into a client. She said, hey, what the hell happened? She says, this does not sound like you, Steve. I said, okay, I'll fix it. And that's when I went back. Yes, you can write. And it has sped up the process a little bit because I don't sit there for hours on end saying, okay, what am I going to write about?
Right.
And what order am I going to put it in? It's done the research while I'm off doing something else and work on another project. And then I'll take that research, pop it in. We'll analyze the research together, create an outline. Then I can write the article in a couple of hours, maybe. The first draft, anyhow.
So let's talk about the review process. My sense is that in some companies, you could debate for months whether the comma goes here or there, and whether you use this word or that word. How do you actually get stuff? How do you ship it with all the people that want to put their fingerprints on it?
First of all, I always have a point person. There's one person who everything is going to go through in that company. If other stakeholders want to hand in it, they got to go through that person. So it's always just you and, if you were the company who contacted me and you were the content marker, I would be sending everything to you. You would send it out if needed. I don't have a lot. The biggest times you'll have that issue be case studies and white papers.
Okay. Because
Blog
the sales
posts, you
team's
rarely
involved
had
at that point, or why?
the sales team, the marketing team, the CEO, and the guy who likes to comb his hair in the executive washroom. They'll all have their little hands on, usually late to the party. So you got to put a deadline on it.
Right.
But when I write, and I just started doing this, and it was kind of scary at first, but it's not. When I do blog posts, for example, when I quote a blog post, or if we're going to do a series of them, I say you have unlimited revisions for the first 30 days. And one guy dropped his finger. Unlimited revisions? I said, yeah. He says, but I have never had to make more than 2.
Got it.
And they were always minor. I have been at this long enough to know that I'm going to get it pretty close to center first time.
Right.
Then they may have, if they want a T. I do use, with the company I have overseas in Europe, we use a Google Doc folder.
Mm-hmm.
I pop it up in there, let them know, hey, it's ready for your review. Then make some click, click, click. We do the comma thing. I'm an AP style guy, but I can't do the, serial killers or serial commas. And so we write it well like they want. But the more I write with them and the more we work with each other, the fewer revisions there are, because we begin to think alike.
Sure.
I begin to see what's important to them. They see why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so revisions it's part of the process. A lot of people say, well, just 2 rounds within 30 days. Or even 1. And anything more than that, we're going to charge you this much for it, for another round. It's, hey, unlimited revisions for 30 days. Let's get this thing down.
Right.
And out and published. And it rarely goes more than 2 or 3.
So we've got this potential divide between shower before work versus shower after work. And, there's a lot of people who say, well, we got to write to a 9th grade level or 7th grade level. And that's actually across, all audiences, so that people will be comfortable reading it. That always struck me as condescending. I don't think you ought to write in a snooty way, but I think you ought to write well and use a decent vocabulary. How do you approach that question?
You're talking about 2 different things there. Write well with a decent vocabulary is not the same thing as writing at a inflated college level. Okay. Yes, you're going to have some jargon in there. That's a given, because something can only be explained through jargon. It is the secret code of that particular industry.
Right.
But how do I put this? If you want to, if you're writing at a high college degree level, just so that it makes you sound like you're intelligent, you're going to come off like an idiot.
Right.
Because nobody's going to read it. You have to write something that people are reading. That doesn't mean, I think the grade levels are kind of a misnomer. And that was the Flesch Kincaid grade levels, and it's even built into Word. And I have brought it down, and it's not that hard to do. Long sentences, cut them in half,
right,
and you'll bring your score down. But you need to write the way I like to write, and you can see this on my own personal marketing material. I want to have a conversation with you, even if it's on paper. If I can ask a question that you have to answer, we've begun a conversation. And so write conversationally, that doesn't necessarily mean write down to them. You're
right.
That's the difference. You're not talking down to them, they're talking directly to them,
right,
on their level. And I've actually had some people send me stuff. Okay, our engineers wrote this. Can you fix it? Make it plain English. And it's not that hard. Most engineers are pretty good. But I have talked to a lot of engineers, and amazingly, they don't talk like they write either.
Right.
They talk to me as a human, and we understand each other. That's why I love when I can get access to the subject matter experts, to the engineers, to the developers. Tell me about this, and pretend I'm stupid. And they have no problem explaining things to me.
Right. You're a big gardener. When you're not writing, you're gardening. I think is it vegetable or ornamental or what flips your hair?
If I can't eat it, it ain't going in the ground. No, we do some ornamental gardening just for looks, but for years we had a big, huge garden behind the house where we had tomatoes and cucumbers and all kinds of veggies. Some of it to eat, some of it to give away, because we had pretty fertile ground back there. But yeah, gardening's fun.
How about the deers and rabbits where you are? Are they a problem?
Yeah, they're a pain in the butt. Especially the squirrels. They'll eat my okra. They'll climb my beanstalks and strip them down. The deers aren't too bad. We're not as rural as we used to be. When we bought it, it was a dirt road and the trees on the side. And now it's a housing addition. That happens. So we get the occasional deer.
Right.
But Arkansas still has a lot of wildlife around, and even in town. But so they're fun.
Other hobbies that give you a diversion from sitting in front of your computer and writing?
My grandkids. I got 3 granddaughters, and they keep me busy all the time.
They live nearby?
Oh, yeah. They're not too far away. They live in the same town.
And do you have them wrenching, or are they into little girl stuff?
We really don't differentiate it that much. We have some that like to do things with granddad. We have things, Mama sews behind that door. She has a sewing business, and she's teaching them crocheting right now.
Oh, neat.
They love to go to the library and learn things. They all take it every Wednesday. They go to the library, swap out books that they've read. And so, we have a huge library, has a lot of other, they have circuses. They have a 3D printer set up in there.
Oh, cool.
It was a library set up to help people get work. But the other day I was sitting watching the History Channel, and in come my oldest granddaughter, and she sat down, was watching intently to what I was watching. And I said, "You want to watch this?" She says, "Yeah, it's interesting. Where do I find this on an app?" Because it's the History Channel. And so, but we do take them fishing and stuff like that. I like to fish. Used to work on computers a lot and repair them.
Right.
My computers would last well beyond the best buy date, and but I don't do as much of that anymore. But I do like doing that kind of thing. A few crafts and things like that, and going bowling or fishing.
So it sounds like you get a broad range of interests.
I think it's healthy because you can find. I urge writers to get out in nature anyhow, because you can see things in nature that will remind you of something you're trying to write about,
right.
And you'll see it from a little different perspective.
Right.
I don't write things like, 5 things I learned about manufacturing from watching fire ants.
There's enough of that crap on LinkedIn already.
Yeah, a lot of that. But you can see some of the cause and effects, and then all of a sudden, for example, I was trying to figure out how to explain marketing, and especially for a writer where you really need to kind of focus. Writers to write anything, write a lot of anything. But I was thinking about that. I was sitting in the bench in our yard, and I looked over at the tree. I thought, there it is, taproot marketing. You got the main branch, which is your main niche that you work with.
Right.
There will be branches up above that are related but different, and then you have a taproot that goes down and holds everything together.
Right.
And I learned that from I had read something similar to that in a book that I was studying, and all of a sudden it got clear. He was talking about market an inch wide but a mile deep.
Mm.
And the same concept. Then when I looked at the tree, it hit me. And I think it wasn't a squirrel throwing stuff at me. I think the actual idea hit me.
How about what's the role of emotion in industrial content? I mean, you talked about sometimes it's too factual, but conversational style is different than emotion. You talked about that hero's journey. Where do you think emotion fits into it?
Emotion fits into everything that we do as human beings. Every human buys anything based on emotion, backed up by logic and reason. Okay. If you're selling, say, a software that does HR stuff, that HR person is liable to be sitting there late at night trying to get the bookkeeping done because payday's tomorrow and they're missing their family. The emotion there is, I want to get home to my family sooner. And if I can bring that out, our software makes it so much easier that you'll be able to go home on time. It's not a jump up and down kind of emotion. It's a feel good more type of emotion. or, not everything can be sold on emotion, but the basic concept is there has to be some emotional reason for them to want to change, or they won't. So we've done it that way forever. Why should we change now?
Right. The status quo is a hard competitor. I heard it put a great way one time. Somebody said the compelling reasons to buy are things that you'll never find on a spreadsheet.
Right. Right.
Is there a book when somebody says, gee, Steve, you've spent years honing this craft, understanding content marketing, understanding how to write in a way that appeals to audiences, where would I start? Is there a book that you give to people or a resource that you recommend?
Of course, I learned most of my copywriting from American writers and artists because they've been around since '97. But read some of the great copywriters and salespeople. One of my favorite guys is Zig Ziglar because I like his value system. And he was one of the greatest salesmen, quote, on earth is how he's touted. But Joe Pulizzi, content marketing. One of my favorite is Ann Handley, who's with Marketing Prof. She has a great book. Everybody Writes 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. 2 guaranteed to be like 30% funnier than 1. But an excellent book because she talks a lot of these principles. I follow Brian Clark a lot, who's another great resource. One of my first websites that I ever followed was Copy Blogger that he started, and now he's moved on from that and doing other things. So he's like the granddaddy of content marketing.
Right.
He actually sold things without selling them. He was the birth of that concept. He would sell software by giving you information. And then it just naturally followed that my website was based on Copy Blogger stuff.
And I've also seen you reference Marcus Sheridan in some of your LinkedIn posts.
Yes, Marcus Sheridan's good. Great. That's the Impact Group. He is the pool guy. He went into a pool company that was failing.
Right.
And I was actually introduced to his ideas from Brian Clark. So he's well known.
Got
it. Marcus Sheridan, trying to think, if you're into video stuff, Andrew Davis is a person to follow on LinkedIn.
Yep.
You can find a lot of these people. Bob Bly, of course, is America's copywriter. He's been the B2B copywriter, for eons. He and I are good, close friends. But I learned a lot from Bob as far as B2B and industrial type copywriting because he came from, he has a chemistry background.
Are you going to write a book yourself?
Another one? The only book I wrote was this kind of dates me, how to use Microsoft Outlook Express 0.5. I might maybe just take an amalgamation of my blog posts and turn it into a book. It's the easiest way to write a book.
Yeah, a Bible of industrial copywriting or something.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do also believe in reading other stuff besides that. I have read anything E.B. White. Of course, there's Strunk and White, but there's also Stuart Little.
Right.
And The Trumpet of the Swan, and all these, because you are learning how to communicate on a human level.
Right.
And Bob Bly actually said, you need to read more than just sales books, Steve. He says, you need to read more than just books about copywriting. And he's got stuff like comic book collection that he has written about. So anything along those lines. But as far as just copywriting, just look for copywriting under them. Look for people that have been in, you've got, of course, I already mentioned Bob, but Rasha Reeves, all these copywriting greats.
A great range of resources there.
Absolutely.
Technical question. Google, well, you said one client used Google Docs. You normally a Google Docs or a Microsoft Word guy?
I'm a Microsoft Word guy. Just like, I'm sorry, unfortunately, I can't see what you have, but I'm a PC. Okay, I'm not a Mac, I'm a PC. I have been using, and my favorite brand happens to be Asus. I'm on a HP right now, but all of my laptops are Asus. But I'm a Microsoft because most people will use it. Google Docs isn't bad. I feel better with it on my computer. But I have used Google Drive. I also use OneDrive. I have done that. It's, to me, a little easier than emailing copy back and forth.
Right. How about helping a company understand that maybe they need to have some content about things that are adjacent, not just about what they do, but maybe if I'm selling compressors to food manufacturing plants, maybe articles about hygienic best practices or PM tracking software or power rectification or trends in food safety or hiring temp labor or whatever the case may be, not about compressors, but about these other things that the people that I'm selling to are probably worried about the rest of the time when they're not thinking about buying my stuff.
Absolutely. I'm in the middle of one of those articles right now. I'm writing for a stainless steel conduit company. But what I'm writing about is food safety and wash down procedures.
That's great.
And we're highlighting that. We're highlighting a use case. Instead of highlighting the conduit itself, we're highlighting a use case. And then at the end, we'll bring in, and here's how stainless steel content or conduit and fittings can help you achieve.
Great. That's wonderful.
Yes, adjacent industries are always great like that to write things. You can write all day about your own stuff, but how does it work in the real world? Right? So write about real world situations and then bring in, and I'm getting this a lot more from people that contact me. We don't want to be hard sell. We want to talk about this topic that's important to our clients. And then at the end, well, we can help you with that.
Right.
And that's content marketing.
All right. So you mentioned people getting in touch with you. How do people get in touch with you?
Usually, well, I have a LinkedIn website or profile.
Okay.
You can go to my website, which is really long. It's maurer-copywriting.com.
I'll put both those links in the show notes.
Or stevescopy.com, which is a redirect, because I got the big long name back when I thought it would help with keyword search, and it didn't do squat. Those are the two best ways. My phone numbers are listed on there.
Okay.
On both of those, so you can contact me through LinkedIn or my website. Those are two best ways. All right. It's easy to set up a call.
So we got to wrap up now. We've talked for a while. It's been
fun.
It has been fun. You've covered a lot of ground, but now give us 3 minutes that wraps up your 15 years of, your career of industrial maintenance and engineering and your 15 years of copywriting, and explain the reasons why industrial content is important and the most important points that people need to keep in mind.
Oh, gosh. After 30 years on the floor, anything you can do to make my job easier in the plant interests me. And anything that makes my boss happy, too, interests me even more. So tell me why your product is good for what I'm trying to accomplish. And so that comes from then the content. When you are writing to your ideal customer, understand who they are and what they're made of. Why is this important to them? And drill down to the core emotional benefit. What really makes your product different for them? Right? Because your product may be the same for everybody, but what makes it special to that one individual person? Some of the times when I was doing the troubleshooting, it was at 3:00 in the morning because I got called in to work.
Right.
What will make my job easier at 3:00 in the morning so I can get my butt back home to bed?
Right.
Before I had to clock in again the next morning. So understand your target audience, allocate the resources that your marketing team, whether you hire an outside copywriter or not, you don't have to hire me. But you'll have copywriters, you'll have content writers in your business. Make sure they have the resources and the information and the backing to get the job done properly and talk directly to your ideal client.
Will you ever just advise an in-house marketing team, not write for them, but coach them?
Yeah.
Cool.
I can do that too. We can work out a strategic marketing plan, find out what exactly what direction they need to be going with that.
Well, this has been a fabulous conversation, Steve. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me here, Ed.
And I hope everyone listening has found as much value in this as I have. Again, please be sure to like it, drop some comments, and by all means, subscribe. And I'm sure that this conversation, like many of the others, will really resonate with some of your colleagues. So if you know somebody in your company that needs to hear this, please share this episode with them. And thank you so much for joining Steve and I for this episode of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast.